So it's been a crazy old week in terms of Irish politics, with the presidential election having now been and gone. And of course, a lot of scrambling is now being done, vying for position behind the new president, the new first citizen, in the shape and form of Catherine Connolly. So I've been discussing this very topic over the last several weeks with Dr. Vincent Carroll, and he's very kindly agreed to join me again this morning. He was very vocal in the Spoil Your Vote campaign, and I would say that's turned into a resounding success. However, if you watch the mainstream media, if you're crazy enough to watch the mainstream media and believe what they have to say, it was a bit of a damp squib. Firstly, good morning, Vincent, and secondly, how are you?
Good morning, Rick. Oh, I'm fine as always, fortunately, and delighted to be here.
Yes, nice to see you again. So let's start this off. Okay, obviously Connolly won, but that's no shock to anyone. We were talking about that. The bookies had called that weeks and weeks in advance. Paddy Power was paying out on that weeks in advance, so that came as no surprise as such. But the Spoil Your Vote campaign in the last Irish presidential election was running at somewhere around 1.3 to 1.5%. It leaped by a factor of tenfold after this election to 13 to 15% was the estimated figures, over 210,000 spoiled votes. Are you surprised at the size of the magnitude of the jump, or is it really no surprise?
Well, at one level, it's no surprise, but I'm very conscious that in this country we don't have a tradition of spoiling your vote, whereas in other countries they do have that tradition. And I suppose the whole concept was put across that the vote was so hard fought for that it seems such a waste to spoil that vote. And that's in the mentality of most people in this country, I feel. But these were exceptional times, and people voted to spoil their vote, which is something different. It's something you have to get your mind around, probably, to vote to spoil your vote. And you're correct. It came in at, I think, about 13%, give or take. But and that's the real story of this election. I mean, obviously, there's stories about winners and losers and who won and who didn't win. But the real story of this election is the spoil your vote campaign and a magnificent showing of people. Now, if you add that on to people who simply didn't turn up, which of course was 55% of the electorate, and people who voted for Jim Gavin, why ever, goodness only knows, but that's another 10%. The reality is Catherine Connolly comes in at 55% approximately of all the votes cast, including the spoiled votes. Now, what is 55% of 45%? Now, I don't, I haven't worked that one out, but it's approximately 20%, give or take.
Yep.
So, in other words, Catherine Connolly is the president for every fifth person in the country. And 4 out of 5 people, like myself, can legitimately say to her, "You're not my president." Because she doesn't have that democratic mandate. A relatively small number of people, and I wonder how many of those were protest votes anyway, as opposed to sort of genuine Catherine Connolly votes. So, all in all, she's a most unrepresentative president, but still a president with the full authority that goes with presidential office. And that is a real, real concern.
It is. Let me ask you a question. The Jim Gavin votes. You said, why the heck would anyone vote for Jim Gavin? Of course, he wasn't even on the ballot at that stage, but technically speaking, he was allowed to remain on the ballot. Could those Jim Gavin voters effectively have been classed as protest voters, people that didn't want to go as far as to spoil their vote, but yet they still wanted to stick two fingers up to the establishment by voting for neither of the other candidates? Because obviously no one voted for him because they thought he was going to win. So could it be fair to say that those votes also could be looked at as a protest vote in addition to the spoil the votes?
Oh, I certainly think so, absolutely. And with the spoil the vote campaign, I mean, if you look when the boxes were opened, they were unevenly distributed. So it's very obvious that with only sort of a week and a bit to persuade people to spoil the vote, you hit certain areas differently than other areas. Some areas, perhaps denser urban areas, are easier to canvass than areas that are strung out in a rural setting. So therefore, I think a lot of people who didn't know about spoil spoil the vote, or who didn't really understand about spoil the vote, or connect with somebody else who was going to spoil their vote. I reckon those people probably voted, excuse me, probably voted for Jim Gavin. Those people voted for Jim Gavin, whereas other people voted for spoil the vote. So it's a spoiled vote. I mean, as you said, nobody seriously thought he was going to win. So if you voted for Jim Gavin, you knew you were going to vote for somebody that wasn't going to get it. I suppose the die-hard Fine Gael person thought there was a possibility, who knows, that Heather Humphreys, and in fairness, she was a genuine candidate, although she must have been a very unsatisfactory candidate from Fine Gael's point of view with the way she performed. But regardless, she was a genuine candidate and people voted for her in good faith and genuinely so. But with Jim Gavin, yes, that was a protest vote. And that plus to spoil the vote, plus the fact that, I mean, the weather was good. There's no reason why people shouldn't turn out and vote. And 40 to 50, I think 55% people chose not to vote. So if you add all that up, Catherine Connolly does not have a mandate. And that's the second story of this election. The first story, of course, is to spoil the vote, which was incredibly high for a country that doesn't have any culture in doing that. And then Catherine Connolly's lack of mandate. But the big concern is when she's inaugurated, all will be forgotten. Her mandates is statistics, and she will be the president occupying, having full presidential office. And that'll be a very serious concern for certain bills that are going to come her way.
Uh, I want to look at that issue of her actually being in situ now rather than it just being a hypothetical question. It's actually going to happen towards the end of November. But just before we move on from the spoiling vote section, because I want to move past that now, undoubtedly, the figures speak for themselves. It was a resounding success for the people that were encouraging other people to spoil the vote. I think the biggest acknowledgement of this, strangely enough, comes from both the mainstream media and the current crop of politicians. But when I say the biggest acknowledgement, what I mean is it was so big that they couldn't suppress it or spin it or diminish it in any way, shape, and form. So you had all of the major mainstream legacy media outlets, both broadcasting and tabloid and print papers, talking about the amount of spoiled votes. Some people were showing the categories. There was a block, and they separated them also. They separated them into Maria Steen spoiled votes, anti-immigration spoiled votes, healthcare spoiled votes, housing spoiled votes, corruption spoiled votes. There was piles and piles and piles that numbered into the hundreds of thousands. That couldn't be suppressed. And of course, you had the like of Simon Harris coming out saying, he would have preferred it if there had been better options in this. When he done everything, he moved heaven and earth, or the equivalent of political heaven and earth, to ensure that there wasn't any choice to be had in this. Also, the same could be said of Martin, who threatened severe consequences to anyone in his party that should veer off the party line. Is that not, again, have they got such short-term memories that they can't even remember what they said and instructed their own parties to do a month in advance?
It was all political stuff, but as you say, I mean, they can't ignore it, and it cannot be ignored. The only, I suppose, outsider in commentary in that area was probably Ivana Bacek of the Labour Party, who described it as a threat to democracy. I would have seen it as an expression of democracy rather than a threat for democracy, and she used the word sinister in trying to describe what happened, which is totally wrong. I mean, that's utterly totalitarian. The others are trying to just jump in some bandwagon to try to say, even the Sinn Féin leader also was kind of speaking about in terms of choice. I mean, they eliminated choice. They eliminated serious, worthy candidates. And Maria Steen was one of them. There were others. And they eliminated those candidates getting on the ballot paper. They thought they somehow or other managed the situation, but in fact, they shot themselves in the foot. And I mean, they made monumental blunders Sanders, look at Fianna Fáil, and that will ultimately lead, I believe, to the demise of Micheál Martin, about time, many would say, and Fine Gael choosing a candidate that was utterly lackluster, a party hack who said yes to everything, the sort of person that only a die-hard Fine Gael person would want. But the middle ground were the people who were completely left astray. Some of them voted for Catherine Connolly as a protest. Most would have, many of them would have spoilt their vote. And I suppose the majority maybe just didn't turn up to vote. It was an exercise in a lack of democracy. It was the antithesis to democracy. There was no democracy there because there was no choice, and democracy is about choice.
Indeed, and of course, you're very sure of what you're saying. I am fully on board with it. I think the same way with self. But if an alien was to drop into Ireland from outer space, okay, if an alien was to arrive here and knew nothing about anything, and listen to us talking, we would occupy this position. Then, if they were to switch on the TV or listen to one of the candidates that were part of that unholy left-wing coalition that got in behind Connolly, they would hear a different story altogether. So for balance, I have a 40-second clip here that was put together by a lady, in inverted commas, called Sinead Gibney from the Social Democrats. And she gave a little summary. I suppose you could say the opposite of what we've just said in relation to Connolly winning. So I want to play this and get your views on it as well. So this is just a very brief clip here from Sinead Gibney of the Social Democrats.
President it's the only office that's voted in directly by the people of the country, and it represents something about our values and where we are as a nation. The signature of her presidency will be, as she said today, a voice for all people. She has been so consistent since she set out her stall, because I feel really perhaps what was lacking from anywhere else in the candidacy, was that vision. What we saw obviously from Fine Gael was a much more negative campaigning mode, particularly in the last number of weeks. But Catherine set out the start that she had a vision for Ireland which was different, which was more equal. She prioritised those issues, particularly around peace and neutrality and climate.
There you go. Sinead manages to squeeze herself into absolutely every single frame of that little video clip there. Do you think she's angling for something, Vincent, or do you think she's just an absolute lover of Catherine Connolly?
Oh, I don't know what it is. I mean, the Social Democrats were one of the people who supported Catherine Connolly, and then they kind of got muscled out of it to some extent by the Sinn Féin, who are pretty good at that, because the Sinn Féin doesn't like two things. They don't like opposition, and they don't like being just one of many. They like to stamp themselves in a militaristic style on top of everybody else. But Miss Gibney there did say something about a president for all. Nothing could be further from the truth. She's a president for 55% of 45% of the people. Now, let a schoolboy work out those maths and see what he comes up with. But you'd be dealing with roughly 1 in 5, give or take. So I would accept she's a president for 1 in 5. She's not a president for 4 in 5. And I just wonder the value of a campaign that would state something like, "You're not my president," because she is not my president. She's not the president of those who voted for other people or who didn't vote. She has the slimmest mandate possible. And to say that the presidency represents where a nation is at, yes, ideally that should be so. And you could say that if, we'll say, 60 or 65% of people turned out on a wet and windy day to vote for the president. But when only sort of 20, whatever it is, sort of 45% or 55% turn out in what was relatively good weather to vote, clearly that does not represent the nation. It does not represent where the nation is at, but it does represent the point of view of a limited totalitarian political leftist Marxist perspective, which is relatively narrow, relatively small, and utterly unrepresented of the vast majority of decent people in our great nation.
Is this the most engineered, spun, and bizarre election that in your lifetime that you've witnessed, whether it be in Ireland or elsewhere? I mean, like, it's hard to beat, isn't it, when it comes
No,
to
no, no,
man?
not elsewhere, not elsewhere, because I'm thinking of totalitarian Europe. I'm
Mhm.
thinking of way back the other side of the Iron Curtain, Czechoslovakia, Poland, countries like
Mhm.
that. Yes, they had elections as well. Some, for some peculiar reason, the ruling party always seemed to win a vast majority, and there was always a vague opposition, like a Czechoslovakia, the old Czechoslovakia. There was the Social Democrats, who effectively were amalgamated with the communists, but they provided some kind of opposition, if you call it that, a fake opposition. And this is what we have here. We have fake opposition, pseudo democracy, a managed situation, something that I think somebody mentioned, a curated situation. That's the nice use of a word. The kind of something that's managed in such a way that creates the sense of democracy, the illusion that people have their point of view heard too, when nothing could be further from the truth. No, we've had elections like this in Europe, but the other side of the Iron Curtain.
I can remember once, I think it was Robert Mugabe, the infamous dictator in Zimbabwe. He held an election once, and when the votes were counted, he had more votes than people that actually lived in the country. I think he had about 1 million votes over and above the entire population of the country. So, yeah, maybe it wasn't the most outlandish one out there, but it's certainly for Ireland, it has to be the forerunner of most bizarre event ever, which was what we're talking about now. So just before we go into, I wanna sort of close the door on this what could have been chapter. You did speak beforehand about Article 14. I think it was, of the Constitution, could be invoked if certain things happen. At this point, at this point, will there be any type of legal challenge to this, or has this horse ran off and it's too late to close the stable door on it now?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I'm not aware of anything. Let's put it that
Mhm.
way. And I
Yeah,
mean, Section 14 is in the gift of government, and I can't see, sort of them doing that. So I think we might just have to swallow this bitter pill
yeah,
and
yeah.
campaign on issues that will be coming in front of Catherine Connolly. And maybe it's no, sort of coincidence, but yesterday morning there was an article published, a report published by the European Commission on Racism and Integration, the ECRI, an official part of the European Union, which was set up in 2002. And it critiques what governments are doing in terms of their broad mandate as they see it. But the point is, they have criticised the Irish government and have said you have to bring hate speech in, that you're, and they gave 15 points to the Irish government as what the Irish government must do. I mean, so much for sovereignty. These are people who are wrapping our so-called sovereign government over the knuckles and saying you have to do X, Y, and a Z. And there were a number of recommendations in, but the chief recommendation was about hate speech. So that'll be next up again, almost certainly. And that document published yesterday will probably be sort of the motivator for government to say, oh, well, there's not a lot we can do about it. We've been prompted by Europe and we don't want to be disgraced. I just wonder, as I said this morning in an article I published, I just wonder what Viktor Orban would have to say about that. If somebody chased after him, you get a very, very different response. But, there you have it. So there will be that bill coming up. It will go in front of Catherine Connolly, who is ideologically aligned with it. Then there'll
Mhm.
be other bills about other things. Probably the assisted dying bill will be next up after that. And I mean, again, as far as I know, she is ideologically aligned with that as well. There is no way those bills are going to get genuine oversight. It'll be a rubber stamping exercise on them, and so, this is what we're up against over the next while. And there is a need to probably keep pointing out that this is a president that does not have a mandate and is taking broad sweeps, authorizing the introduction of legislation without a broad mandate, and that needs to be protested against.
Yeah, one thing, there may not be a legal or formal legal challenge to this. Maybe it's, as you say, it's a bitter pill to swallow, and it's been swallowed. The taste is starting to dissipate from the mouth a little bit, but I don't think that it's over in terms of the opposition to this. Not my president elect Catherine Connolly. Now, she has spoken of, so let's look at what lies ahead. She will be effectively in situ from, I think it's towards the end of November. She's come out with a speech in Dublin Castle. I'm not going to play that, but a couple of things that I noticed in particular about that speech was she kept talking about a new republic, and she's going on about, you know, a unified Ireland, and she says it feels like she lost her right arm whenever the partition happened and all this business. So this new republic concept, let's look at that for just 1 second. So if you bought an old house, okay, an old derelict cottage somewhere in Connemara, and you decided it's inhabitable, you want to stay in that area, you want to remain in that area, but you want a nice, fancy new house. Well, then you're going to have to bulldoze the old one down and then construct something on the remnants of what was once there. When I hear this business about a new republic, it used to be the talk would have been of a united Ireland, a push for a UI, a united Ireland. Well, it seems to be more now a new Ireland, and they're talking about a new republic. Has that concept, the united section, got a little bit of baggage with it? Are they trying to get this blank canvas mentality with any potential voters, and especially young people? They're pushing hard and getting the young people involved. Said, right, we need something catchy, we need something exciting, a new republic. Let's have a new republic. Let's have a new this, a new that. But surely something has to go in order for something new to take its place.
Of course, the problem with people who want a new republic is there is a stumbling block, an inconvenient document that gets in the way, and that's called the Constitution. So they still have to get it over the line, no matter how they package abolishing articles of the Constitution. It's something that requires an awful lot of work, and I think people will be very, very reluctant about any sort of a new republic. I mean, it's a bit like abolishing the old rules without having declared what the new rules shall be, and I mean that's not going to happen. But the idea is they do want a blank canvas. And if they were, people like Connolly and others were rebuilding up this country again from scratch, it would be a very, very, very different country. And by a new republic, they probably mean something where where there's, for example, the delimiting of property rights inevitably will be part of a new republic, because that's been pushed at by those people who've been promoting Catherine Connolly. And of course, they put it in the common good. It's never, the common good, incidentally, is never your common good or my common good. And the idea is that you need to put sort of, delimit property rights so that people can be accommodated, again, I quote, according to their needs. Now, supposing if somebody had a family, supposing if the family go off, get married, they're changed, and they're an older couple in a house, maybe there's 3 spare bedrooms, are they accommodated according to their needs? So therefore, in this new republic, that's only one narrow example that I'm demonstrating, because I think it resonates with most people in a country where everybody wants to own something, no matter how little. One wants to still own something, and therefore we can resonate with the idea of property being taken off people according to their, when you'll be accommodated according to your needs, and all dressed up for the common good. So that sort of will be part of a new republic, because that's being canvassed for by people who support Catherine Connolly, particularly people before profit, to a more opaque extent Sinn Féin, and it's been raised within Labour Party circles as well. I don't want that. Most people don't want that. We've worked hard enough to get where we've got, and we're not going to surrender or give up something. But that would be an example of a new republic, and that again would ideologically align with Catherine Connolly and her backers.
I'm listening to what you're saying there. I'm envisioning this new republic in light of other things she said in that statement. So from what she has said, so she said she values everyone. Number one, of course she does. She wants to be a president for everyone, even people like you, Vincent, who spoiled her vote. She's even wants to be representative of you. I'm sure you would take a hard pass on that if she offered to represent you, especially if it was a legal case and you were a tenant. We'll say no more about that one. She champions diversity. She talked about language. She talked about the importance of the Irish language. She talked about the importance of English. And then she talked about the importance of new people's language as well. So I'm seeing this new republic, this new Ireland, and I'm seeing a lot more people in it than are currently in it at the minute. But the extra people that I'm seeing are not Irish people, because they're reproducing at a rate that is, let's just say, suboptimal. We're heading towards extinction in that respect. But there's a lot of people piling in from all over the world. The doors are open. Roderick O'Gorman sent the messages out, multilingual, Somalian, you name it. He sent the messages out and the people came. So is it fair to say that this new Ireland, the people are scratching their heads thinking, I wonder what that will be like? It's fair to say there'll be a lot more people in it, and there'll be a lot more diversity in it, and it'll be championed by the left wing.
Well, Catherine Connolly did say that Ireland is not full, but try explain that to anybody trying to rent an apartment. Try explain that to anybody trying to buy a house. I mean, Ireland is full. If you fly over Ireland, maybe in a drone or a helicopter or something like that, and look down, you see lots and lots of green fields here, there, and everywhere. But I mean, they're economic units that produce food to give us an element of food security. So, I mean, it is not true to say that Ireland's not full. Ireland is full. And I mean, the sheer economics demonstrate that. But you're perfectly right. I mean, if you can bring people in from other cultures, then you dilute our own culture. Now, if people come in from European culture, and we've been privileged by hosting very many people from a range of different countries in Ireland over the last sort of probably 20 years, certainly since the fall of communism. And that's perfect. That's, people who have Christian values, people who can align with us as a nation, people who've settled in extremely well. But we're talking about people who don't want to settle in. We're talking about people who want to impose their values, be a Sharia law, whatever, on the rest of us. People who have no intention, who want to lead a ghettoized, separated, apartheid-style life within this nation for the sake of changing this nation and its values. People who have no loyalty to our history, no loyalty to European civilization, no loyalty to Christian heritage, no loyalty to the very things that make Ireland and other nations a great nation. Now, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting there's some deficit in other people's cultures. All cultures need to be respected, and in many ways, all cultures have tremendous things within them. But the point is, they are different, and different can be celebrated, but different must be kept different. And we as a nation, surely as a nation, we have certain roots, certain ground rules that we have, certain things that people can identify with. And people can identify with Christian values. People can identify with European heritage and values. The building, of Europe, the art of Europe, the poetry, the literature, all of that has a certain commonality about it. But when you go to other countries, they have completely different cultures that are impossible to, I suppose, incorporate within our culture. So therefore, they live totally and utterly separate lives. And part of that culture, if you call it culture, is the denigration of women and children. The woman that walks 5 paces before the man, Muhammad with his 5 wives, or whatever it is. I mean, these are not sort of extreme examples. This is what is the norm. This is common. Go to the top of O'Connell Street in Dublin around Parnell Square, and you'll see exactly what I mean. These are people who import their culture. They're not here to learn. They're here to teach us. And that's not right. That's wrong. And that will dilute us. We're an indigenous people in Ireland. We're on the Celtic fringe of Europe. We're a small nation under threat with a small population. And our vibrant diaspora lives outside of the country. But as a nation here within our 3-mile limit or whatever, we're a small, fragile nation on the Celtic fringe of Europe. And, we need to preserve what we've got. I mean, our Celtic friends and neighbours in Wales have a lovely expression, daldy dare, hold your ground, hold your ground. Don't give in. Don't be pushed aside. Don't be bulldozed out of the way. And that is what is at risk of happening in this country. So therefore, a president like Connolly poses a real threat to our identity, to our comfort, but above all, to our future going on, to future generations generations who may not identify this nation as the nation that it now is and is rapidly disappearing. And people like on the far west, the far left, like Catherine Connolly or whatever, are the people that are responsible for this. So therefore, I will put Catherine Connolly on notice. The people, 4 out of 5 people did not vote for you. 4 out of 5 people have a right to be heard. And 4 out of 5 people, we will reclaim our voice loudly and clearly and legally and democratically, but nonetheless without relentlessly.
Wow. I like that. I like that. I feel all riled up now. I feel like I should get myself a horse and a battle axe and head towards towards the Tall. So that's a great statement. And of course, you know, if Catherine Connolly was here, if you could morph me into Catherine Connolly, she would sit like this and grin
She's,
at you.
she's probably a nice person in her own right, and you could probably have, if you didn't discuss politics or religion or economics or
Mm,
anything, just if you discussed the weather with her, for example,
mm.
you could probably have a nice cup of coffee with her. But anything
I think
beyond the weather
you're
would
losing
be
the
too
run of
much,
yourself
you
there. I
know?
think if you went for a coffee with her and it was raining outside, she'd say, "Isn't this a beautiful summer's day, Vincent?" And then she would grin at you with that unsettling
She might, but she
grin.
has spoken about climate, and climate is another thing that's very
Oh
much
yeah,
part of her. And climate, and I mean current climate legislation, such as the Nature Restoration Act that all our MEPs voted in favour of, is hostile to Irish farming.
mhm,
I mean, Irish farming, you know, the majority of people in Ireland are not farmers, but we're either food producers or food consumers. So we're
yeah.
all in it together. It doesn't make any, there are only 55,000 Dutch farmers in the Netherlands, for example, and there's about 12 million other people. But the point is, the Farmers' Party over there, the BBC or BBB or something, it's a Farmers' Party that would be sort of climate skeptic. And they did incredibly well because they were able to point out that consumers and producers are together in this. We need food security. We need them and they need us, if you like. So it's not a them and us. We're all part of the same nation and we're all doing our own thing. And we need farming, and the Nature Restoration Act and other parts of the climate agenda that Catherine Connolly pushes and that all the left push as well. I mean, there was some of them, like the Green Party, that were supportive of Catherine Connolly, want to turn rural Ireland into some car park type of a theme park that you go cycling in at weekends. They even talk about introducing wolves. Now, I mean, I certainly don't want to, I'm happy to meet a squirrel or something, but that's about it, you know. So there's this nonsense, this sort of idiotic type of conversation around some of these fringe minor parties. That's what they all are. They are fringe parties. People before profit get 2%. The Green Party collapsed at the last election. The Sinn Féin vote collapsed. But when they all came together on this, I believe, one-off occasion, yes, and when the others made monumental blunders with Gavin and with Humphreys, it cleared the decks. And, you know, because of that, I mean, as well, with Maria Steen and others knocked out of it, I just wonder if the party leaders knew that Gavin was going to get knocked out and that Humphreys would do so bad. Would they have kept the choice so narrow? You know, because they didn't know they were going to make monumental blunders. But that's another story for another day. Point is, Connolly is dangerous. Connolly will sign whatever comes in in front of her. So the big drift now, the big push now must be Dáil Éireann, must be to prevent some of these bills ever seeing the light of day. And remember, the hate speech legislation fell at the very last fence. And I mean, it almost got over the line because people were sleepwalking along with it. Now we all need to be awake and vigilant and challenge everything from the absolute get-go rather than wait and depend on the Senate to stall something at the last minute.
Oh, well said. You know, I wanna stop there because I know you're busy this morning. You're traveling at the minute, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your morning to hop
Oh,
on
pleasure.
and talk to me and give your views on this. And I think from what you've said and from what I'm reading and from what I'm hearing other people is that this effective vote for Connolly was 1 in 4 or 1 in 4 to 1 in 5, somewhere in between. There are 20 odd percent people voted for. 80 odd percent of people didn't. And I could say that those that did vote for her, and it's coming up to that most wonderful time of the year again, I liken it to turkeys voting for Christmas. So I'm going to leave it at that. Release you back into your other business that you're taking care of this morning. So massive thanks again. That's Dr. Vincent Carroll. There'll be a link in the description box underneath this video to his Telegram channel. I encourage you to go on there and follow it. It's a great little library of speeches that he makes to camera, really powerful speeches, rallying speeches, and also information from other parts of Ireland. So check that out down below. So big thanks to you, Vincent. That's Dr. Vincent Carroll.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm Rick Munn. This is No Risk, No Reward Media, over and out.